Well, it's a new day. Got the Herald behind me with freshly rebuilt engine in, which it's almost ready to fire up. So, got to get the static timing set, get the oil system primed, and then it should be time to turn the key. So, let's get on with it. Okay, so first thing, the engine is at top dead centre as indicated on the crankshaft pulley, and we're on the firing stroke for the first cylinder. I've got the distributed drive dog sat in there, and it's currently pointing in the direction of cylinder 2, more or less. That's because I'm expecting, as I turn the engine now, it's going to take a little bit before it drops down, and hopefully it'll engage in the direction of cylinder 1, which is what we need. Okay, so I actually made a mistake here, and in the interest of not propagating that mistake, I wanted to explain it now, rather than when I actually figure out what's going on later in this video. So, I've built a Herald 1360 engine up to the same spec as a Spitfire Mark III. However, I have not changed the distributor, so I'm still using the Lucas 25D distributor. But what I've done is fitted the drive dog for the oil pump and the distributor in the position it needs to be for a Spitfire. Now if we see these two diagrams, the Herald and the Spitfire distributors actually end up in slightly different positions. And if you look at the caps, the plug leads are not in the same relative, or the places where the plug leads connect are not in the same relative orientation either. You can see this is the right position. So our rotor arm in the Spitfire with the Delco distributor is pointing towards cylinder 1, and that's where the plug lead will be for the first cylinder. In the case of the Herald, you see our rotor arm is pointing away from cylinder 4, and this is where the cylinder 1 plug lead will be. So because I was thinking I've built a Spitfire engine, I had that alignment in my head, but obviously with the different distributors that was incorrect. So let's get back to assembly. I've also found the handy thing. So I left I mentioned I left the horn. There's an extra piece that goes between the two engine bay balances that the horns bolt onto. And I left that off because I thought I just didn't want to, if I need to take stuff apart again, that's one less thing to do. However, it turns out that leaving that off means that I can get my socket onto the crankshaft pulley and turn the engine in a less awkward fashion. Okay, and you should be able to see that the slot there is offset, and that the bigger half of the circle of this side is facing towards the engine at this point, and that's because that corresponds to the same thing on the bottom of the distributor. That is 180 degrees wrong. It's the thinner side of that gear that should be towards the engine at number 1. Number 1 is firing, because if you look, so my rotor arm, this is where the distributor will go on. Rotor arm is pointing towards number 1, and needs the dog to be the other way around. Let's try that again. Okay, so that's now in. Engine's at the right position, rotor arm's at the right position. So now we've got to follow the procedure described in the manual for setting the initial advance. So this is a Lucas 25D distributor. It has an adjuster here, and it has a
an R and arrows on it to indicate advance and retard. The manual describes setting it all the way to as far in the retard direction as it will go, and then adjusting the body of the distributor until the point's just open, which I'm going to measure hopefully with my multimeter. So one probe connected to the wire that would eventually connect to the coil, and the other just needs to be grounded somewhere. So now it's secured so the distributor won't move. And now, because we're at top dead centre, we can advance this and read the advance on the scale. So I'm just going to do that and then see if I can get the scale to show up on camera, because it's quite small. So you can just about see little ticks there on the vacuum advance unit. So each of those equates to 4 crankshaft degrees, and the static timing for the Spitfire Mark III engine, which is more or less what we've built here, is 6 degrees advance. So that's what I've got it set at, and we'll see how we go. Obviously it's quite easy, now this is in a fixed position, it's quite easy to adjust this in a logical sort of way. So what I need to do next is get the oil system primed, and then try and start. Okay, so in order to prime the oil system, what I need to do is get something down into that hole we can see that will engage with the oil pump drive that's normally driven by the drive gear that also drives the distributor off the camshaft, and spin that manually, manually with the drill. So my plan is to sacrifice another scrap push rod. It's a nice long bit of metal, and on the end it's got a shape that's close enough in width to that drive dog. So what I'm going to do is fill up that end with weld and then grind it down so it takes that drive shape, and then chop the end off and stick it in the drill and see if that will work. Okay, we've got oil. Let's see how well this works. So, put this in reverse. Expect maybe there's some splashing, so let's try and avoid that. Okay, so distributor is connected up, battery is connected up, got no water, and I've disconnected the ignition, we've got no fuel. But I first want to see if it'll crank and if it'll spark. The first problem was a blown bulb, no oil pressure warning light, but I've replaced that, so... That sounded like the starter was spinning but not engaging. Right, so I've got the starter motor pulled out. It's fairly easy when you've got a driven ratchet thing, otherwise it'd be a bit of a pain. Anyway, it's occurred to me that the position of the crankshaft's changed relative to the engine, because there's been machining work done. That's not going to be a very large change, but it still happened. I've also switched the flywheel for a different one, and the bell housing. Anyway, there's supposed to be a certain amount of clearance between the starter motor pinion when the starter motor is off and the ring gear. And it sounds like, the starter motor is spinning up and just spinning. So I suspect that clearance is wrong and the starter motor is too far in, and so we're not actually ever getting a mesh. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to disconnect the starter motor and bench test it, just to check it does spin up fine. So the motor's running fine. Could see that the threads here are looking a bit dodgy though, which is annoying. I do have some spare starter motors, so I'll see if I can scrounge a replacement part. Okay, so for the out of mesh clearance, we have this that sits on, well, this was already here, this sits on the bell housing, and starter motor bolts through it. So what we're looking for is to be able to measure, if our ring gear is here, we need to measure that distance. Because if our ring gear is here somewhere, we're never going to mesh. So to make this a little easier, I tend to do this. Because now we're able to measure, so this is where the rear engine plate would be. So we're able to measure from the outside of the rear engine plate on the car to the inside of the ring gear, and then we're able to measure the distance between here and here on the actual motor. So that is 1 3/8 of an inch. So I've managed to measure in here by getting the caliper in behind the ring gear and using a straight edge across the front of the engine plate to measure that distance, and then subtract the width of the ruler, and that gives me an outer mesh clearance of just under an eighth of an inch, which is under the 3/32 minimum recommended, but there is wear on both gears, so that doesn't explain why we got no engagement. Or apparently no engagement. So I've put the starter motor back in. I couldn't see anything wrong, so I'm just double checking myself. I I was playing around with, I'd got out all the junky spare starter motors I've got, one of which barely span, and I could see that the Bendix wasn't moving down the shaft when it was going slowly, which, that's how it works. It's got to go, starter motor's got to spin up really, really fast, and that throws the Bendix down, engages it with the wing gear. And then I realised I didn't have the engine earth strap connected, so I've done that. Now, see what happens. Battery on first, that helps. Hey! So there we are, engine spin. Now let's check we're getting spark. So ignition's connected. We are. Let's get some water in the rad. Okay, just had a bit of a water leak, but that was just a Jubilee clip that wasn't tight enough, so if I can get the fuel pumping. It sounds like we have fuel in the float chambers. So here we go. I'm going to give it a try. I'm really quite nervous because, if it's one tiny little thing wrong, it's not going to work very well, or be very expensive. Let's see what happens. So my attempt to actually start the car yesterday failed, and that's because I have the distributor position completely wrong. So I was thinking in terms of the Spitfire, which has a different distributor, a Delco style one, which has a different type of cap, presumably with different positions. So we're actually expecting, we're now at top dead centre on the firing stroke of number 1, and for the Spitfire this is correct, having the rotor pointing more or less at cylinder 1, but for the Herald, expect it somewhere over here. And that would have made sense if I had a thought looking at the cap, because that's number 1. So we really want the rotor arm pointing somewhere near that. So, get the drive gear back out, do it properly. Well, that took a bloody long time. Right, before putting anything together, let's check this looks sensible. I'm pointing at number 4. Away from number 4. About there, we're going to be in the range fitting number 1 plug lead. Okay, so the ignition's disconnected for the moment. I'm going to give it a crank the oil pressure back up. Ignition and oil. All light will go out. Right, the ignition's connected again. Some clothes pegs on the choke. There we go. Okay, so I've got a bit of an exhaust leak, bit of a water leak, but it's running. My water leak is the core plug at the rear of the head. That's that for tonight. Okay, but I'm going to call this one done. So there's clearly a leak from the rear of the head. Did see an exhaust leak. I've gone and ordered a new core plug and some various types of sealant, cram it full. I'm going to try and do it without taking the head off. I've got an idea, so we'll see if it works. But for the time being, it starts. So thanks for watching, commenting, subscribing, and we'll see you next time.